Ethan Sullivan was sitting alone at a wedding reception when three little girls appeared at his table. Curly hair, pink dresses, eyes full of mission. The tallest one leaned in and whispered, "Pretend you're our dad tonight." Before he could respond, a crumpled $5 bill was pressed into his palm. "Please," the smallest one added. "People always look at Mommy like she's broken." Ethan opened his mouth to refuse, but then he saw her walking toward them. Their mother, beautiful and exhausted, bracing herself for another night of pity. He had 15 seconds to decide. 3 years ago, Ethan Sullivan buried his wife on a Tuesday morning. The sky was absurdly blue that day, the kind of blue that felt like an insult. Since then, he had learned to exist in the margins of life, showing up just enough to fulfill obligations, disappearing before anyone could ask how he was really doing. Weddings were the worst. All that hope, all that promise, all those couples dancing like the world would never break them. He came tonight because the groom was his college roommate, and saying no would have required more energy than saying yes. He had chosen the table farthest from the dance floor, near the exit, where the music was just a dull pulse, and the laughter felt distant. His plate was untouched. His glass of whiskey was half empty. He had planned to stay exactly 90 minutes, long enough to be seen, short enough to escape before the bouquet toss. That was the deal he made with himself. Show up, shake hands, leave before the memories caught up. But then the girls appeared. The tallest one had freckles across her nose and the confident stance of someone used to being in charge. The middle one kept tugging at her sister's sleeve, nervous but determined. The smallest one clutched a crumpled $5 bill like it was a sacred offering. They moved with the synchronized precision of children who had rehearsed this moment, probably in whispers behind a bathroom door. "Pretend you're our dad tonight," the tallest one said. Her voice was low, urgent, as if she were negotiating a hostage situation. Ethan stared at her, certain he had misheard. But then the smallest one stepped forward and pressed the money into his hand. The bill was warm and damp, probably from being squeezed too tightly for too long. "This is all we have," she said. "But please, we just want Mommy to smile tonight. Really smile. Not the pretend kind." Ethan looked at the $5 in his palm. He looked at the three faces staring up at him. Hopeful, desperate, too young to understand how absurd this request was. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to hand the money back and walk away. He wanted to tell them that he was the last person on earth qualified to pretend to be anyone's father, that he could barely pretend to be alive most days. But then, he saw her. Caroline Hayes was walking toward them, weaving through the crowd with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to navigate chaos. She was beautiful in the way that exhaustion sometimes makes people beautiful. Stripped down, unguarded, real. Her dress was simple, navy blue, probably the nicest thing she owned. Her smile was already forming, but Ethan could see the tension underneath it. The way her shoulders were slightly raised, the way her eyes were scanning the room, anticipating judgment before it even arrived. He had seen that look before. He wore it himself every time he walked into a room full of happy people. The girls noticed their mother approaching, and their urgency intensified. "Please," the middle one whispered. "Just for tonight. You don't have to do anything. Just sit with us. Let people think we have a dad." Her voice cracked on the last word, and something inside Ethan cracked with it. 15 seconds, maybe less. Caroline was getting closer, her smile growing more strained as she prepared to apologize for whatever trouble her daughters had caused. Ethan could see the script already written on her face, the embarrassed laugh, the quick gathering of children, the retreat to a corner where no one would bother them. She had done this before, probably hundreds of times. He thought about his empty apartment, the silence that greeted him every night, the way he had become so skilled at disappearing that sometimes he wondered if he was still real. He thought about his wife, who used to drag him to parties and force him to dance, who believed that showing up was the first step to feeling alive. What would she think if she saw him now? Hiding at a wedding, running from 3 little girls in pink dresses. The answer came to him clearly, in a voice that sounded almost like hers. She would be disappointed. So when Caroline finally reached the table, already opening her mouth to apologize, Ethan did something he had not done in 3 years. He made a choice that terrified him. He stood up, smiled at the girls like they were his own, and turned to Caroline with an expression he hoped looked natural. "Hey, you made it," he said. "The girls were just telling me about their week." Caroline's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, suspicion, a flicker of hope she immediately tried to suppress. She looked at her daughters, who were now beaming with barely contained triumph. The tallest one gave a tiny nod, as if to say, "Trust him." The smallest one had already climbed into a chair and was patting the seat next to her, inviting her mother to sit. "I'm sorry," Caroline said slowly, her eyes still searching Ethan's face for an explanation. "Have we met before? I don't remember." At the rehearsal dinner, Ethan lied smoothly, surprising himself. "We talked briefly. You probably don't remember. It was crowded." He pulled out a chair for her, a gesture so automatic it felt almost natural. "Please, sit." The girls saved you a seat. Caroline hesitated. Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes, the instinct to protect herself versus the desperate wish to believe that something good might actually be happening. The girls watched their mother with breath held, their small hands clasped under the table. Finally, Caroline sat down. The tension in her shoulders released just slightly, like a held breath finally escaping. She was still suspicious, still waiting for the catch, but she was sitting. That was enough for now. Under the table, the smallest girl reached over and squeezed Ethan's hand. A silent thank you. A tiny contract sealed. He squeezed back, not knowing what he had just agreed to, only knowing that for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than empty. The wedding band started playing a slow song. Couples drifted toward the dance floor. Somewhere across the room, someone laughed too loudly at a joke that probably was not that funny. The world kept spinning, oblivious to the small miracle happening at the corner table. Ethan Sullivan, who had spent 3 years practicing the art of disappearing, had just chosen to stay. And Caroline Hayes, who had spent years bracing for disappointment, was sitting next to a stranger who looked at her like she was not broken at all. Neither of them knew what would happen next. But for now, in this moment, that was enough. The first 30 minutes were a delicate performance. Ethan answered questions he had no business answering. Caroline watched him with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion that she could not quite hide. The girls filled every silence with chatter about school, about the flower girl's dress, about how the cake had 3 layers and they each wanted a different one. They were good at this, Ethan realized. They had probably spent their whole lives smoothing over awkward moments, protecting their mother from the weight of empty chairs. A woman in a sequined dress stopped by their table, her eyes sweeping over the scene with obvious curiosity. "Caroline, I didn't know you were bringing someone tonight." Her voice was sweet in the way that poison is sometimes sweet. "And who is this handsome stranger?" Caroline's spine straightened. Ethan could feel her preparing a response, something polite and deflecting. But before she could speak, the tallest girl jumped in. "This is our dad's friend," she said smoothly. "He's visiting from out of town." The lie was so confident, so perfectly delivered, that Ethan almost believed it himself. The woman smiled, satisfied with the explanation, and moved on to her next target. When she was gone, Caroline turned to Ethan with an expression that was difficult to read. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, so the girls would not hear. "I appreciate whatever this is, but you don't owe us anything. If you want to leave, I'll make up an excuse. Ethan considered her offer. The exit was right there, maybe 20 steps away. He could shake her hand, pat the girls on their heads, and disappear into the night like he always did. No one would blame him. No one would even remember. But the smallest one, Violet, he heard Caroline call her, was drawing circles on the tablecloth with her finger, humming a song he did not recognize. The middle one, Rose, was carefully arranging the sugar packets into a tower, and Lily, the tallest, was watching him with eyes that were far too old for her face, waiting to see if he would fail them like everyone else. I don't want to leave, Ethan said. The words surprised him as much as they surprised Caroline. Unless you want me to. Caroline studied his face for a long moment, searching for the lie, the angle, the inevitable disappointment. She found nothing but a tired man who seemed, against all logic, to be telling the truth. Okay, she finally said, but I need to know something. Why did you agree to this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. So why? The question hung between them, heavy and honest. Ethan thought about lying, about giving her some easy answer that would make sense. He thought about saying he was just being polite, or that he felt sorry for the kids, or that he had nothing better to do. But Caroline had spent enough of her life being lied to, and something about the way she asked made him want to give her the truth. Because I saw you walking toward us, he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. And I recognized the look on your face. You were bracing yourself, preparing to apologize, getting ready to be dismissed. He looked down at his hands, at the crumpled $5 bill he had slipped into his pocket without thinking. I know that feeling. I've worn that face. And I thought maybe, just for one night, neither of us should have to wear it. Caroline did not respond right away. Her eyes were bright, but she did not cry. She was too practiced at holding herself together to let a stranger see her fall apart. Instead, she just nodded, a small movement that meant more than any words could have conveyed. The girls, she said after a while. They've never done anything like this before. I don't know what got into them. From across the table, Lily spoke up, apparently not as distracted as she had pretended to be. You always look sad at parties, Mom. We just wanted you to have fun for once. Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were explaining something obvious to a slow adult. And he looked sad too. So we thought maybe two sad people could be less sad together. The logic was so simple, so brutally childlike, that Ethan almost laughed. Instead, he felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut for 3 years. The wedding band shifted to a slower tempo. Couples began drifting toward the dance floor, their movements lazy and content. Violet tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed at the dancers with obvious longing. Mom, you should dance, she said. You never get to dance. Caroline shook her head, the refusal automatic. I'm fine here, sweetheart. I don't need to dance with her, Lily said to Ethan. It was not a request. It was a command, delivered with the absolute authority of a child who had already decided how the evening would go. That's what dads do at weddings. They dance with moms. Ethan looked at Caroline. Caroline looked at Ethan. The moment stretched between them, fragile and uncertain. You don't have to, Caroline said quickly. They're just kids. They don't understand that. One dance, Ethan said, standing up before he could talk himself out of it. He offered his hand, palm up, fingers slightly trembling. If you want to. Caroline stared at his hand like it was a foreign object, something she had forgotten existed. Then, slowly, she took it. The dance floor was crowded, but they found a small space near the edge where the lights were dimmer and the other couples were too absorbed in each other to pay attention. Ethan's hand settled on Caroline's waist. Her hand rested on his shoulder. They swayed together, not quite in rhythm, not quite comfortable, but trying. I haven't danced in years, Caroline admitted. since before the girls were born. I haven't danced since my wife, Ethan said. The words came out before he could stop them. His wife, the subject he never discussed, the wound he kept carefully bandaged. He felt Caroline's hand tighten slightly on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement. "What happened?" she asked, "if you don't mind me asking." Ethan took a breath. The music swelled around them, providing a kind of privacy that silence never could. "Car accident. 3 years ago. She was coming home from work, and a truck ran a red light. They said she didn't feel anything." He shook his head slightly. "I don't know if that's true, or if they just say that to make people feel better. Either way, she was gone before I could get to the hospital." Caroline was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry. That's a terrible thing to carry." "It is," Ethan agreed. "But I've learned that everyone carries something." "What's your story?" "The girl's father." Caroline's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "He left when the girls were 2. Said he wasn't cut out for the dad thing. 3 kids at once was too much pressure, too much noise, too much everything." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He sends birthday cards sometimes. No money, no visits. Just cards with his name printed at the bottom, like he's a distant relative instead of their father." "That's worse," Ethan said without thinking. "At least death is final. You can grieve and eventually move forward. But someone choosing to leave, over and over again, that's a wound that keeps reopening." Caroline looked at him with something like surprise, as if she had not expected him to understand. "Most people tell me I'm lucky he's not dead, that at least the girls have a father somewhere out there." "Most people don't know what they're talking about," Ethan said. For the first time that evening, Caroline laughed. A real laugh, warm and unexpected. The sound of it cut through the noise of the reception and landed somewhere deep in Ethan's chest. He realized, with a jolt of something like fear, that he wanted to hear that laugh again. The song ended. Another one began. They kept dancing. From their table, the 3 girls watched with satisfied smiles, their small faces glowing in the candlelight. Their plan was working. Their mother was dancing. The sad man was making her laugh. Everything was going exactly as they had hoped. The hours slipped by faster than either of them expected. They talked between dances, sharing fragments of their lives that they rarely shared with anyone. Caroline told him about the bakery where she worked, the early mornings, and the flour-dusted aprons, and the customers who never said thank you. Ethan told her about his job as an accountant, the rows of numbers that kept his mind occupied, the empty apartment he returned to every night. They discovered small connections, a shared love of old movies, a mutual distaste for small talk, an agreement that most wedding cake was overrated. The girls orbited around them, occasionally interrupting with demands for more punch or reports on the other children at the reception. It felt improbably like a family. But as the evening wore on, reality began to seep back in. The band announced their final set. Guests started gathering their things and saying their goodbyes. The girls, despite their best efforts, were fading. Violet already asleep in her chair, Lily and Rose fighting yawns. "I should get them home," Caroline said, and the words landed like stones in Ethan's chest. "It's way past their bedtime." Ethan nodded. This was the part where the spell broke. The clock striking midnight, the carriage turning back into a pumpkin. He had known it was coming, but knowing did not make it easier. "Thank you," Caroline said, standing up and beginning to gather her daughter's belongings. "For tonight. For playing along with whatever this was. The girls will talk about it for weeks." She smiled, but there was sadness in it now. "And I'll remember it too." Ethan watched her wake Violet, watched her smooth down flyaway hair and button up tiny cardigans. He watched her prepare to return to her real life, the one without dancing, without laughter, without someone to share the weight. He thought about his own apartment, the silence, the empty chair across from his at dinner, the way he had learned to fill his evenings with nothing at all, just to avoid feeling the absence of something. The girls were ready now, lined up like little soldiers, tired but reluctant to leave. Lily caught Ethan's eye and held it, her expression unreadable. She was waiting, he realized, waiting to see if he would let them walk away, waiting to see if he was like everyone else. Caroline extended her hand for a formal goodbye. "It was nice meeting you, Ethan." "Really?" This was the moment, the turning point, the place where Ethan Sullivan had to decide if he was going to keep hiding from life or finally take a step toward something real. He took her hand, but he did not shake it. Instead, he held it, gently, like it was something precious. "Would you want to get coffee sometime?" he asked. Not pretending, not playing a role, just coffee. "With me." Caroline's eyes widened. Whatever she had expected, it was not this. "You mean that?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "You actually want to see us again?" The word us hit Ethan square in the chest. Not just her, all of them. The whole package, the exhausted mother, and the 3 little girls who had ambushed him with a crumpled $5 bill and a desperate request. "Yes," he said. "I mean it." Caroline stood very still, the way people do when they are afraid that moving will shatter something fragile. Behind her, the girls had stopped fidgeting. Even Violet, half asleep, seemed to be holding her breath. "Okay," Caroline finally said. And then, softer, like she was convincing herself, "Okay, coffee. I'd like that." They exchanged numbers. It took less than a minute, just a few taps on phone screens. But it felt monumental. It felt like the beginning of something that could not be taken back. As Caroline led her daughters toward the exit, Lily turned around and waved at Ethan. A small wave, almost secretive. He waved back. Then they were gone, and Ethan was alone again at the corner table. But for the first time in 3 years, the loneliness did not feel permanent. It felt like a temporary state, a pause between chapters, rather than the end of the story. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill. He smoothed it flat against the table and looked at it for a long time. Then he tucked it carefully into his wallet, next to a photograph he had not looked at in months. A photograph of his wife, smiling on their wedding day. She would have liked Caroline, he thought. She would have liked the girls. She would have told him it was time. The coffee shop was nothing like the wedding reception. No soft lighting, no romantic music, no champagne bubbles or dancing couples. Just fluorescent lights, the hiss of an espresso machine, and a Tuesday afternoon that felt aggressively ordinary. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table by the window where he could watch the door. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his jeans twice before Caroline walked in. She looked different in daylight. Smaller, somehow. More real. She was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the navy dress, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup, or maybe just a little. Ethan could not tell. She scanned the room until she found him, and when their eyes met, she smiled. But it was a cautious smile, the kind that was ready to retreat at the first sign of trouble. "You came," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure you would either," Ethan admitted. "I thought maybe you'd realize how crazy this is and change your mind." Caroline laughed, but it was a nervous laugh, nothing like the warm one from the dance floor. "I almost did. 3 times this morning. I kept picking up my phone to cancel and then putting it back down." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup he had ordered for her. Black, 2 sugars, a guess based on nothing but instinct. "But the girls would never have forgiven me. They've been asking about you nonstop since the wedding. Lily especially." "And you?" Ethan asked. "Have you been thinking about me too? Or just the girls?" The question was bolder than he intended, but it was out now, hanging in the air between them. Caroline's cheeks flushed slightly. She took a sip of her coffee, buying time. "Maybe," she finally said. "A little." The conversation that followed was stilted at first, like two people relearning how to walk after a long illness. Without the wedding atmosphere to carry them, without the girls to fill the silences, they had to find their footing all over again. They talked about safe things, the weather, the coffee, the traffic. Small talk that neither of them was good at. But then Caroline asked about his wife. Not the facts. She already knew those from the wedding. She asked about who his wife was, what she was like, what Ethan missed most about her. And something about the way she asked, direct but gentle, made Ethan want to answer honestly. She was loud, he said, surprising himself with a smile. She filled every room she walked into, talked to strangers, like they were old friends, laughed too hard at her own jokes. He stared into his coffee. The house got so quiet after she was gone. I still haven't gotten used to it. Sometimes I come home and expect to hear her voice, and then I remember. Every single time I have to remember all over again. Caroline reached across the table and touched his hand, just briefly, just enough to let him know she understood. "Does it ever stop?" she asked. "The remembering." "I don't know," Ethan said. "I don't know if I want it to. If I stop remembering, it feels like losing her again." Caroline nodded slowly. She understood that too. The fear of letting go, the guilt of moving forward. "I think that's why I stopped hoping," she said after a moment. "After he left, after the divorce was final, I told myself I would never let anyone in again. Because hope is dangerous. Hope makes you believe things can get better. And then, when they don't, the fall is so much worse." Her voice was quiet, almost confessional. "The girls don't know this, but I almost didn't come to that wedding. I had the dress on, the babysitter canceled last minute, and I thought, this is a sign. Stay home. Don't put yourself out there. Don't give anyone a chance to look at you with pity again." She looked up at him. "But Lily found me sitting on the bed, and she said, 'Mom, what if something good happens?' Just like that, like it was the simplest thing in the world." Ethan felt his throat tighten. And something good did happen. "Something terrifying happened," Caroline corrected, but she was smiling now. "A stranger agreed to pretend to be my kid's father based on a $5 bribe. That's not good. That's insane." "Best kind of insane," Ethan said. They sat in silence for a moment, but it was a different kind of silence now. Comfortable. Honest. The silence of two people who had stopped performing and started being real. "I'm scared," Caroline admitted suddenly. "Of this. Of whatever this is becoming. I've spent so long protecting myself and the girls from disappointment. And now, here you are, and I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize how complicated my life is and run away." Ethan considered her words carefully before responding. "I'm scared too," he said. "I've spent 3 years avoiding anything that might make me feel something. Because feeling things means you can lose them. And I've already lost enough." He met her eyes. "But I'm more scared of going back to being numb, of spending another 3 years just existing." Caroline's grip tightened on her coffee cup. "So, what do we do?" "One more coffee," Ethan said simply. "And then maybe another one after that. We don't have to figure out the whole future today. We just have to decide if we want to try." Caroline was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay. One more coffee." That was how it started. Not with grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but with small choices made one at a time. One coffee became two. Two became weekly dinners. Weekly dinners became Sunday mornings at the park with the girls. Ethan learned their rhythms. Lily's fierce independence, Rose's quiet sensitivity, Violet's endless questions about everything. He learned that bedtime was a negotiation, that broccoli was a battle, that homework required bribery. He learned to braid hair badly, and then better. He learned the words to songs from cartoons he had never heard of, and Caroline learned to let him in. She showed him the small apartment where she had built a life on her own. She introduced him to her coworkers at the bakery. She let him see the exhaustion she usually hid, the moments when she wanted to cry but couldn't, the nights when she wondered if she was enough. She also learned about his wife. He showed her photographs, told her stories, let her into the part of his heart that he had kept locked away. Caroline did not ask him to forget. She did not compete with a ghost. She simply made room for the love he still carried while building something new alongside it. Months passed. Seasons changed. The relationship grew roots, weathering arguments and misunderstandings, and the ordinary friction of two imperfect people learning to share a life. There were hard days, days when Ethan retreated into silence, days when Caroline's independence flared into defensiveness. But there were more good days than bad, more laughter than tears, more hope than fear. The girl stopped calling him Ethan and started calling him E. It was not Dad, not yet, but it was something, a name that belonged only to them. One evening, almost a year after the wedding, Ethan took Caroline back to the same venue where they had met. It was empty now, just a rented hall with folding chairs stacked against the wall. No music, no flowers, no guests. "Why are we here?" Caroline asked, confused. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill. He had kept it all this time, tucked into his wallet next to his wife's photograph. He held it up so Caroline could see. "Because this is where 3 little girls changed my life, and I wanted to come back here to ask you something." Caroline's breath caught. Her hand flew to her mouth. Ethan got down on one knee. "I know I'm not what you pictured. I know I come with baggage and grief and a tendency to disappear into my own head. But I love you, and I love those girls, and I want to spend the rest of my life being the family they hired me to pretend to be." Caroline was crying now, but she was also laughing. "You kept the $5, she managed to say. "This whole time, you kept it." "Best investment I ever made," Ethan said. "So what do you say? Will you marry me?" "Yes," Caroline whispered, and then, louder, "Yes." The wedding was small, just close friends, family, and 3 flower girls in matching pink dresses who took their duties very seriously. The ceremony included vows not just between Ethan and Caroline, but promises to Lily, Rose, and Violet. Ethan knelt down to their level and told them he was choosing them too, that they were not an addition to his family, but the heart of it. Lily, ever the leader, responded on behalf of her sisters. "We chose you first, at the wedding, remember?" Everyone laughed. Even Ethan, who had not laughed at his own wedding the first time around, found himself smiling so hard his face hurt. 2 years later, there was a new addition, a boy named James, with Ethan's eyes and Caroline's stubbornness. The apartment became a house. The house became loud and chaotic, and full of the kind of mess that means people are living, really living. The $5 bill was framed now, hanging in the hallway where guests could see it. Visitors always asked about it, and every time one of the girls would tell the story about how they saw a sad man at a wedding and decided to hire him to be their dad. "Did it work?" visitors would ask. "Obviously," Lily would say, rolling her eyes in the way only teenagers can. "He's still here, isn't he?" On their 10th anniversary, Ethan and Caroline sat on the porch after the kids were asleep. The house behind them was quiet for once. The stars were out. Somewhere down the street a dog barked and fell silent. "Do you ever think about that night?" Caroline asked. "The wedding? How different things could have been if you had just said, 'No.'" Ethan thought about it. He thought about the empty apartment, the silent dinners, the years of just existing instead of living. He thought about the 3 little girls in pink dresses who had seen something in him that he could not see in himself. "I think about it all the time," he said, "and I'm grateful every day that I was too tired to be sensible." Caroline leaned her head on his shoulder. "The girls still talk about it, especially Violet. She says it proves that magic is real." Ethan smiled. Maybe she's right. Maybe magic is just what happens when someone takes a chance. They sat together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the life they had built. Somewhere inside the house, James murmured in his sleep. One of the girls, probably Rose, was still reading under her covers with a flashlight. It had all started with a whisper. "Pretend you're our father." And Ethan Sullivan, who had spent 3 years hiding from life, had chosen to say yes. That was the only magic required.